Zechariah is the most eschatological, meaning focuses on futuristic end times narratives. It's the most eschatological book in the Old Testament. It's the most apocalyptic book in the Old Testament. And as we have been seeing as well every single week, it is the most messianic book in the Old Testament. In other words, of all the books in the Old Testament, and we're talking Psalms, Isaiah, there's a lot of books that really focuses on Jesus. There is no book in the Old Testament that focuses on the Messiah more than the book of Zechariah. And we've seen that as we've gone through these visions. So the first 6 chapters, as you know very well, if you've been attending over the last weeks, we've been looking at each vision as they come. And obviously each vision, as weird and odd as they might be, the symbolism within those visions are pointing us to what Jesus is going to do in the future, particularly in relation to the people of Israel and the nation of Israel, the land, the location itself. In chapter number 1, you had the vision of the 4 horsemen. And this is an important one for us because today we come to the end of the 8 visions. And we're going to look at the 8th of the 8th vision. But the 8th vision correlates very closely to the first vision, which is a vision of these 4 horsemen. And in this vision, you have Jesus who is leading his angelic army to accomplish his providential plans, even though we may not see it. This is what's transpiring in the spiritual realm. But the vision, basically, it's Jesus who is watching over Jerusalem. It is Jesus and his angelic beings, his angelic host, his army, who is watching over the nations of the world. And even though there's paganism and there's sin and there's wretchedness and depravity in the world is somewhat at peace. At least it's not falling apart. It hasn't completely devastated itself. And so that's a strange thing to the angels in vision number 1 there. They're confused by that. Why is there peace on earth? Why is it that mankind has not totally killed themselves yet? You ever pondered that yet? How is it that we're still alive as if you want to throw out that word species there, which I don't particularly like to use, but how is it we're still alive? We're so depraved. We're so bent on destroying one another. How is it that we haven't nuked each other yet? Well, whether you realize it or not, in the background, in the spiritual realm, God is holding things back until a right time, the time, his time. And devastation is coming, but it's going to be on his time clock. And so that's the vision of the 4 horsemen, and that's vision number 1. Vision number 2 is a vision of these 4 horns and 4 craftsmen. And this vision is revealing to us that Jesus will conquer all of Israel's enemies in the future to come. That's also in chapter number 1. In chapter number 2, we get the 3rd vision, and this is a vision of a man with a measuring line, very, very similar, almost identical to the vision in the book of Ezekiel. And this is Jesus as well. This is the vision of Jesus will build his kingdom exactly as he determined that he will. And nothing will alter it from coming to pass. In vision number 4, which is in chapter number 3, we have a vision of the high priest being made clean. And the high priest symbolically represents the nation of Israel. And in this vision, it reveals to us that Jesus will take away the sins of his people at one time, in one moment. And we see that throughout the rest of the scriptures as we looked at that. In chapter number 4, you have the 5th vision. And this vision is of the 2 lampstands and the lampstand and the 2 olive trees. And this vision is about how Jesus has a plan of saving Israel in one day. He announced it in the previous vision, but now he explains how it's going to be done. It's going to be done by a work of the Holy Spirit. It's going to be done because of the preaching of the gospel. And it's going to be a work of the truth of the gospel being received, repentance and belief in the person of Jesus Christ. And so that is the means by which that will be accomplished. In chapter number 5, you have the 6th vision, and this is a vision of the flying scroll. Another strange vision. But this one is revealing to us that Jesus is the judge of the world. And even though it seems like sin is just rampant and everything, you can get away with almost anything, and how is it that God's not bringing in justice right now? He will. Be patient. I probably will end today's sermon with looking at a passage in one of Peter's epistles where he reminds us that God not bringing judgment on this world is actually an act of His grace. That's an act of His patience on this world so that the gospel continue to go forth. But the day will come when He will. And then you have in chapter number 5 as well, you have the 7th vision, the strangest of them all. And this is the vision of the woman in a basket. The one that we had fun with last week because of all the weird, the flying stork ladies and the lady in the basket that flies around in the temple that was built to her in worship and all these unusual imagery in it. But basically that vision is revealing to us that Jesus is restraining evil in the world. And He will do so until the right time. And when the time is right, He'll let evil have its day. Or you could say its hour, because it's not going to be very long. It'll be a short period of time where Satan, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and the demonic realm will have supreme power in this world. But it will be very, very short-lived. And that is because of what we're going to see in vision number 8. So this is chapter number 6, if you're not there. Zechariah, chapter number 6 is where we're going to be today. Vision number 8 is what we're going to look at. Now, only the first half of this chapter is vision number 8. And I don't want to take a lot of time here because there's an appendix to these 8 visions. And I'm particularly excited to get into that portion. It's the grand finale. It's the summit. It is what summarizes all of these 8 visions together. And I'm really looking forward to getting into it. But this 8th vision, what are we seeing here? Well, I suppose there are 5 questions that I'm going to ask as we go through this 8th vision and just kind of try to make sense of what we see. The first question is this: what did Zechariah see in this 8th vision? And if you're new, by the way, let me just kind of set the context here. All 8 of these visions came in one night. And they're not dreams. They're actual visions. The angel comes along, wakes up Zechariah, says, hey, wake up, I got something for you to see. And he's kind of just, I would imagine he's probably sitting in his room, probably sitting on his bed, and he's kind of looking out in space. And the angel's asking him, I'm showing you something, what do you see? And each one of these visions is different things that he's seeing. And the angel's asking him, what do you see? Do you make sense of it? Well, this one, it says in verse number 1, then I turned and raised my eyes and looked. And behold, 4 chariots were coming from between 2 mountains, and the mountains were mountains of bronze. So this is what he sees. He looks up and he sees 4 chariots. Now, chariots, you typically think of them in Roman movies and so forth, and maybe sometimes we just kind of think they're transportation to help you go fast, but that's probably not the best way to think about a chariot, what a real chariot was used for. A chariot is a piece of military use. It was, think of it in the sense of modern sense, it's kind of like an army tank. It was built for warfare. It was made for swiftness in warfare so that if you're throwing spears or if you're, with the bow and arrow, and you're trying to get around, you're trying to maneuver quickly on the battlefield. That's what the chariot is for. And sometimes they would put sharp, edges on their wheels and things like that to try to cut the legs of other men and horses and so forth. But it's a war machine is what a chariot is for. It's a war machine meant for speed. And so the very first thing that is seen in this vision is something to allude to the fact that there is warfare coming. Suffering, pain, death, loss, battle, so to speak. And the fact that it's in the vision, it's a chariot, that symbolizes that this is referring to the speed at which it's going to come. And if you've ever read the book of Revelation, you'll know that word quickly is used often in the book of Revelation, that when these final events come, they're going to be fast. They're not going to be dragged out over hundreds or thousands of years. There's going to be swiftness to it. When the wrath of God comes, when the judgment of God comes, it's going to be something that, just like the motorcycle that just drove by, it's going to be fast. It's going to be real quick. I'm assuming that was a motorcycle there. It's going to be quick. It's going to happen in a very short period of time. And so here you have this war machine, this chariot, the swiftness of warfare, coming from, it says in verse number 1, between 2 mountains. And you say, well, what 2 mountains is this referencing? Often mountains reference kingdoms in the Bible, But I'm not certain that's the case with this particular verse. In ancient times, both the rabbis and the early church fathers were in agreement that these two mountains are representing Mount Zion and the Mount of Olives, two very estologically important locations when it comes to end times events. And so there seems to be a historic precedence that this is what these two mountains are referring to. But I think it's important to also note how he describes these mountains. He says these mountains were mountains of bronze. That's interesting. So once again, it's a vision. So he's not looking at two actual real mountains. These are just mountains of bronze. But he says that these chariots are coming from between these two mountains. And the rabbis and also the early church fathers would argue that this is a reference to the Kidron Valley, and that these, I'm going to get ahead of myself here, unfortunately, these angelic beings are coming from the Kidron Valley, and they're going to the north, they're going to the south, and they're bringing judgment onto the land. But what I find interesting is when he mentions these two mountains, and he mentions these chariots coming from between the two, and just so that we're clear on this, when I talk about the Mount of Olives and the Mount of Zion, they're very close to each other. And in between them is the Kidron Valley. It's just basically a low-lying area where there used to be a creek that ran through there, not anymore. And these two mountains face each other, and I've walked from one top to the other. It's a very short walk between the two mountains. The Mount of Olives is important, and I'll explain why as we get closer to the end of the book of Zechariah. But you have the Mount Zion. And what is Mount Zion? Well, that's Jerusalem. That's the old city of Jerusalem. It's often a name given to the city of David as well, but more specifically, it's a reference to the Temple Mount. It's a reference to that hill by which all of God's prophecies and so much of what has transpired with the nation of Israel has taken place. And between those two mountains, you got this little low-lying area, and that's the Kidron Valley. So that's potentially what this is referencing here. But when he mentions they are mountains of bronze, that draws my mind back to some Old Testament references, particularly in 1 Kings chapter 7, verses 13 through 22, when Solomon is building the temple of God. And Solomon hires an outsider to come into the land of Israel to build two pillars for the entrance of the temple. And these two pillars are made of solid bronze and was one of the most magnificent parts of the temple. The pillars themselves were over 35 feet high and over 18 feet round. They are massive pieces of metal work, and bronze is a hard metal. And so you have these two bronze pillars that were ornate. They had carvings all in them, and they stood there just in this boldness, just stood there as an entrance into the temple of God. I also find it interesting in Daniel chapter number 10, in Ezekiel chapter number 40, and in Revelation chapter number 1, all of those passages reference Jesus as having elements of bronze. Find that interesting. And the reason I tie all of that together is because it's going to become very clear as we progress through here what this is pointing to, the events that this is talking to. So take a lot of that and put it in the back of your mind. And look at verse number 2. This is the second question I have. Not only what did Zechariah see in this last vision, but what are these chariots that he's looking at? What do they look like? Well, verse 2 gives us a description. It says, with the first chariot were red horses. Well, as we continue to read through here, you're going to see the correlation between the first vision and the eighth vision, that these are very similar to each other in the fact that they have these colored horses. Now, we're not in the land of Wizard of Oz, although these 8 visions may make you feel like but these are definitely horses of a different color. Some of you older folks that watched, the Wizard of Oz many times growing up stuff, you'll get that reference. But maybe I'm dating myself. I don't know. I'm not that old yet. But I remember those old movies very, very well. So he has here, first of all, the first chariot was a red horse, or led by red horses. And red most usually typifies that of bloodshed, war, death, and devastation. And he also sees the second chariot, and it's of black horses. And black horse, or at least black in general, is typically a reference to famine, disease, and death, and so forth that comes that way, economic devastation as well, sometimes in Scripture. And then in verse number 3, you have this third chariot, and it's a white horse or white horses. And white typically references victory or purity. And then also there in that verse, you have the fourth chariot, and it has dappled horses, dappled being spotted or gray horses. And typically that is a color that is correlated with death. And so here you have these four colors. However, there's not a lot said about their colors or what their meaning is or what their connection. And if you've read these couple of verses thus far, and you've also read the book of Revelation, you're probably making, wait a minute, there were four horsemen in the book of Revelation, and they were the same colors. In fact, that's true. In Revelation chapter number 6, you have the four horsemen right before the seals are broken. And you have a white horse in Revelation 6, and a red horse in Revelation 6, and a black horse and a pale horse. The pale horse being of that kind of that dappled description here. And in that passage there, Revelation chapter number 6, the white horse is given a crown. And the crown is given its authority, its power, its leadership, but it comes without having to go to war. It comes without having to conquer, without bloodshed. And you have this red horse, and to the red horse, it was granted to the one on the red horse to bring about death on the earth, war, to take peace from the earth, and for there to be war between the nations on the planet. And then there was this black horse in Revelation 6, and a pair of scales was in his hand, and it was granted to him that there would be economic turmoil in the world. And then you have the pale horse that was mentioned in Revelation chapter number 6, and power was given to him to kill people on the earth, to bring death to earth, and to bring death by sword, to bring death by hunger, to bring death by disease, and to bring death by the beast of the land. And so he just represents death in general, like people are just dying during that time. Now you say, what's the correlation between these two? Some might try to connect the two. I don't personally connect the two. I think they're two opposites, in my opinion. When you read in Zechariah chapter number 6, it becomes very clear that, we haven't got there yet, but it becomes very clear, I keep getting ahead of myself. It becomes very clear that these are angelic beings sent out from God with a mission to do God's judgment on the earth. But when you read Revelation 6, that doesn't seem to be the case at all. Now, these may be demonic entities, demonic forces who are intervening in the affairs of mankind, but the language is interesting in Revelation chapter number 6. The language is each one of these colored horses are granted by God to do something that is not good. They're all granted some evil. They're granted some negative harm on the planet. They're not commanded. They're not sent out for a particular purpose. There's an evil intent in their heart, and they're granted the ability to do so. In fact, there is nothing that Satan or demons or there's no evil in this world that can be accomplished without God first allowing it. And God has his purposes for that. And so there seems to be a difference between the two sets of horses, but both of them, I believe, are a reference to the angelic realm, the spiritual realm. That behind the scenes, things are at work, and they're allowing things to happen in the physical realm that we live in, whether it be good or whether it be bad. But if you're here in Zechariah chapter number 6, look at verse number 4, and this is my third question. Not only, what was the vision and what did these horses or these chariots look like, but the third question is, what do the chariots represent? And we do get a little insight on that. He says in verse number 4, "Then I answered and said to the angel who talked with me, 'What are these, my Lord?'" That's what we're all asking, isn't it? It's like, okay, we've seen it with you, Zechariah. We get a good sense of what you're looking at. Now, what is it? What exactly are we looking at? What does it mean? Verse number 5, "And the angel answered and said to me, 'These are 4 spirits of heaven.'" You could say angels. See, these are 4 spirit beings of heaven. They're not demonic, kicked out, fallen angels of earth, but these are angels of heaven. And how do I know that? It says who go out from their station before the Lord of all the earth. These are angelic beings who are in heaven, who are in their place, their proper place in heaven. They are awaiting and looking for the instruction and the direction of God, the Lord of hosts. That's what that phrase that you see so often in the Bible, Lord of hosts, means the Lord of angelic armies. And he says that they're in their station before the Lord of all the earth. Now it goes on to say in verse number 6, and I think this is the fourth question that we need to bring about, and what are these angels doing? So these are angels that have left heaven, so just get clarity here. These are angels from heaven, stationed in heaven, doing what they were created to do. But now they have been sent out from heaven, and they have a job to do. They've been given a responsibility. And what is that exactly? Why did God send them out from heaven down to earth? Verse number 6 says, "The one with the black horses is going to the north country." Now, what is the north country? That, for some of you who study eschatology, your antennas should be going up. Like, wait a minute, we've heard that phrase a time or two, haven't we? Whether you're reading the book of Daniel, whether you're reading the book of Isaiah, whether you're reading the book of Jeremiah, it doesn't matter where you're at, you're going to hear a lot of talk about the north country, or the north king, or the north land. That is a constant phrase in eschatological talk. And depending on where you're reading, and that's both the Old Testament or New Testament, depending on where you're reading, it's either talking about the location of the Antichrist coming from the north, or the warfare of the Antichrist in the north, or his capital, because the Antichrist, his capital will be in the north country. And you say, well, first of all, what is the north country? Well, that's easy to determine when you read the scriptures. It refers predominantly, in the passages where it's referring to the Antichrist, it's predominantly referring to the time of the Assyrian Empire. You have the Assyrian Empire predominantly took place, the location of it was in the northern section, which would be modern-day Turkey. This would be modern-day Lebanon and Syria. This would be modern-day Iraq and Afghanistan, and going all the way into modern-day Iran, that entire stretch along the north. And so whether it was the Assyrian Empire or even the Babylonian Empire, which is often referred to as the north as well, they occupied the same location. And even the Greco-Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, even during the times of Alexander the Great, they all occupied the same terrain, the same territory. The only empire in the ancient world that did not occupy that realm of territory was the Roman Empire, although it very much attempted, it tried, and was successful at much of it, but not all of it. And so when there's a reference to the north, it is often a reference to the Assyrian Empire, or the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And this is why, and it's without question, that multiple times in the Old Testament, the Antichrist is referred to as the Assyrian. That's a title of the Antichrist, the Assyrian. And it's a reference to the location from which the Antichrist comes. And so here he says that these black horses, these horses of death and disease and also of economic destruction, are going to the north country. And then he also says the white are going after them. The blacker horses, the black chariots are going first, and behind them is coming the white. And the white reference, as I mentioned a moment ago, victory, conquering. And as we have pointed out, these 8 visions, they are chronologically showing the events leading up to the grand purpose of all things. And since I've already gotten ahead of myself a couple of times this morning, I might as well jump ahead now. It's like the grand scheme of all things, the grand goal, the summit of God's plans on earth is the coronation of Jesus Christ as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, to rule once and for all of eternity as King over all. That is what everything is ultimately leading to. In fact, I would encourage you to remember that. It will help you. It will help you immensely when you read your Bible to understand everything is actually moving to one purpose. And if you understand what the goal is, if you understand what God's plan is, if you understand what God's ultimate purpose for all things will be, it helps you as you read the Bible to understand how everything fits in line with that. Because everything that goes on in this world is all part of the plan. The plan is Jesus is king. The plan is Jesus on his throne. The plan is Jesus ruling supreme in this world. That is the plan, and everything is moving towards that plan. And so you have here these angelic beings who are assisting God, assisting more specifically here, Jesus in the fulfillment of that plan, which requires taking out the Antichrist, which requires taking out the New Babylon, which requires taking out the enemies of God on this earth. Now, he goes on in verse number 6 to talk about the dappled chariot, the dappled horses, and they are going towards the south country. And no matter where you're reading in the Old Testament, this is another phrase that should easily be understood by most of us, I think. The south country is almost always referencing Egypt. And Egypt is a key part in eschatological writings. The Antichrist, if you didn't know this, the Antichrist doesn't like Egypt. He goes to war with Egypt. There's conflicts with Egypt. He goes in and he conquers Egypt. Saudi Arabia also comes in and tries to defend as an ally to Egypt and the Antichrist. And there is warfare there that takes place. And so this is a reference to Egypt here. You have this dappled horse here, or the horse that represents death, going into Egypt. And why is that? Well, if you've read Daniel 11, if you've read Daniel 10, if you've read Daniel 12, if you've read the book of Revelation, if you've read much of other places in the book of Isaiah and elsewhere, then you know that Egypt gets pummeled. Egypt gets destroyed. And this is a reference to the events that will transpire with that, the death that will take place in the south country. In verse number 7, he says this, "Then the strong steeds." Now, he's talked about the black horses and the white horses and the dappled or the spotted gray horses, but he hasn't talked about the red horses, and I think that's what this reference, then the strong steeds. I think this is a reference to the red ones. He says, "The strong steeds went out eager to go that they might walk to and fro throughout the earth." That's the same language that was in vision number 1. But in vision number 1, the angels were restricted. They couldn't intervene. They couldn't get involved in the affairs of mankind. But that's not the case here. And this is why it references them being eager. They were eager in vision number 1 as well. It's like, we want to do something. We want to help. We want to get this going. But the time's not right. And so they're eager to go out, that they might walk to and fro throughout the earth. And he said, he's no longer holding them back now. He says, "Go walk to and fro throughout the earth." So they walked to and fro throughout the earth. Now you say, what is the goal of these angels? This vision of chariots and these horses and all of the symbolism here. What is the goal of it? Well, that's given to us in verse number 8. The goal of these angels are just very simply stated. "And he called to me and spoke to me, saying, See, those who go toward the north country have given rest to my spirit in the north country." The north country, obviously, once again, representing that final empire, which is in Revelation, he gives us a description of where that Babylonian empire, that new Babylon, that final empire, where it will be established. And he says it will be like the Babylonian Empire. It will be like the Persian Empire. It will be like the Greek Empire, but it will also be like the empires of the past that have occupied those locations. And so that's all in the northern section, the far north of Jerusalem here. And so he says, "Go and bring peace." Now the NLT translates that final phrase this way: "Look, those who went north have vented the anger of my spirit there in the land of the north." God is angry with the wickedness. God is angry with the Antichrist. God is angry with the false prophet. God is angry with the war that is being established there to go against him. And there is now peace that is brought. God brings peace on this earth. And so this is the language that is used again and again. There's so much, as I said, there is so much that I could get into. I'm only scratching the surface on this 8th vision. But that's because this morning, I really want to get in verse number 9 and on. Are you ready for this? This is where it gets exciting. So envision this. Speaking of visions, it's been a long night for Zechariah. He's had 8 visions back to back. Pretty intense visions, pretty intense night. The night is over. The day has come. He awakens. It's a new day. And no longer is it an angel speaking to him. On the following morning, it is God himself who comes to Zechariah and basically puts a cherry on top of this cake. Says, you've seen a lot of things, grand things, wondrous things about the future that will happen. Things that should encourage you, things that should inspire you, things that should get you excited about the days ahead. Now let me make it even more exciting for you, because I want to reveal to you the grand purpose, the plan, what all of this is ultimately about. And so what most Bible scholars would refer to the second half of chapter 6 is as the appendix. I guess you could label it that, but it kind of makes it sound as if it's not that important or not that great. It's far more than just an appendix. It is God coming to Zechariah and basically saying to him, now let me myself, not some angel, not some vision, let me myself speak to you and reveal to you what this is all ultimately leading up to. And he does it by doing this, we'll say a fake coronation. It is there's some individuals that I want you to bring along, and they're going to play part in a play, so to speak. And this play is going to represent a future grand event. And that future grand event is none other than the coronation of Jesus Christ as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So let's see how this unfolds. Verse number 9 says, then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, receive the gift from the captives. Now, the timing of God is perfect. In one night, he has these 8 visions. He wakes up the following morning, and there are exiles who are coming from the faraway land of Babylon who have arrived that morning. And they haven't traveled all that distance empty-handed. As we'll find out later, they come with silver and gold that has been given to them by the Persian king, and that silver and gold is to be used in the building of the temple. And so God tells Zechariah, go meet these exiles who are coming in. Go meet this caravan that has finally made its way back to its homeland of Israel. Go meet them and receive the gifts from them. Take this offerings, these gifts that are going to be used for the building of the temple. So go and receive that from them. And then he gives a couple of their names, and they're symbolic. He says, receive the gift from the captives from Heldai, Tobijah, and Jediah. So these 3 individuals here. And these are not 3 Mormon missionaries. I know it kind of sounds like it, but with those names and stuff. But these are just some Hebrew guys that have traveled. Most likely they are of Levitical, Levite, priestly lineage because of who they meet up with and what they do. But their names have importance to us, and that's why their names are given. Heldai, his name means the Lord's world. It is the Lord's world. And Tobijah, his name means the goodness of Yahweh, or God is good. And Jediah, his name means Yahweh knows, or God knows, which is also a play on words because the entire book here, the prophecies are given to this young man, Zechariah, and his name also means God remembers. God remembers and God knows and God is good, and this is God's world because God has a plan. And everything is coming about just as God wants it to come about. And so you have these 3 Hebrew gentlemen here. And what do? Well, verse number 10 tells us that they who come from Babylon and go the same day and enter the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah. So these, Josiah and Zephaniah, his father, these are Levites. These are priests. And they go so as soon as they arrive, the following morning, as soon as they arrive, they go to meet with the priests to do their priestly duties, to do their priestly activities. And verse number 11 says, Take the silver and gold, make an elaborate crown, and set it on the head of Joshua. Now, I have to pause here. This is so beautiful. Joshua, if you remember, he is the high priest at the moment. And so he says, they're bringing silver and gold. Now take that silver and gold, melt it down, and make an elaborate crown, a kingly crown. Now, it's interesting to know, and you might want to mark this down in your Bible, the Hebrew word for crown there is not in the single, it's in the plural. So he says, make elaborate crowns. But there's not multiple people to wear these crowns. There's one individual. Make multiple elaborate crowns for Joshua to wear. The imagery here is just spot on. I remember in the book of Revelation, at the very end, when Jesus receives his crowns and he receives his authority and he receives his kingship and he sets up his throne to rule over this world. Do you remember the Bible says in Revelation chapter 19 and verse number 12 that on his head were many crowns? Not one crown, many crowns. Where did those crowns come from? Well, if you remember reading in Revelation 4, you had the elders who were casting their crowns before. We were given authority, we were given power, but we don't deserve it. You deserve all the glory. You deserve all the power. You deserve all the praise. And they cast their crowns before his feet, just as I suppose we will do one day as well. You get it all. You rule, not us. You rule. Cast the crowns at his feet. And so when he comes as king, he's wearing many crowns. Now, focus for a moment on Joshua. Joshua is the high priest. By law, it is illegal for any one of the Levites, and it is illegal for any priest, and even much more so, it is illegal for a high priest to serve as king. That would be considered sin in the eyes of God. And so that makes this vision, not this vision, but this coronation, this mock coronation, that makes it even more unusual. Bring the high priest in and crown him as king. That's something that you're not allowed to do. In fact, the Bible tells us in 2 Chronicles, there's a curse that goes along with that. In fact, a king should never do priestly work, and a priest should never do the work of a king. And they should never cross paths. And yet, again and again and again, in the Old Testament and New Testament alike, it tells us that our Messiah is both king and priest. He is our civil leader, governs over the world, and yet he is the priest. He is our spiritual leader as well. In Matthew chapter 1 and verse number 21, it says, when Mary is to be giving a name to her son, she is told that you will bring forth a son and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Some of you know this, but some of you don't know this. That in the Old Testament, Hebrew, you have the name Joshua, but in the New Testament, you have the name Jesus, and they're the same name, Yeshua. So Joshua is the name Jesus. They're one and the same. It's just Jesus is more Greek and Joshua is more Hebrew. And so he takes Joshua, the high priest, and the name Joshua means Jehovah saves. And God says to Zechariah, put many crowns on the high priest's head, Joshua, the one whose name means Yahweh saves or God saves, and crown him as king. Are you starting to get the image here, the picture here? And so he goes on to say, verse number 12 says, then speak to him, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts, saying, speak to Joshua and say to him, behold the man. We'll pause there for a moment. You remember when Jesus was about to be crucified and he stands before Pilate? And in John 19 and verse number 5, Pilate says, behold the man. Whether Pilate knew it or not, he was quoting from the book of Zechariah, fulfilling the prophecies of such. But what's being emphasized here is that the king to come, the Messiah to come, the priest king who will wear many crowns, he is a man. Behold the man. The Messiah is a man. Now, I know that we don't struggle with that much, but when you read the Old Testament prophets, it's hard to imagine that the Messiah could be a man. Because when you read what the prophets have to say, it seems that it's contrary to that he's not just a man. He is God himself who comes and dwells among us. But that is not what is being revealed here. That he says, behold the man, that this Messiah to come, this king, this priest to come, he is a man. Behold this man. And he's given these crowns. Now you remember when Pilate, at his crucifixion, Jesus was also given a crown then too. But it wasn't a golden, elaborate crown. It wasn't many crowns. He was given a crown of thorns. Because when the Messiah came the first time, he came to be a suffering lamb. And when the Messiah comes the second time, he will be the roaring lion. And he will rule over this earth. So he says, behold the man whose name is the branch. And hopefully, in your translation of the Bible, branch is all capitalized. And it ought to be, because that is a title of the Messiah. It is a title given to the Messiah in Isaiah 4, verse number 2, in Isaiah 11, and verse number 1, Jeremiah 23, and verse number 5, Jeremiah 33, verse 15, and also we already saw it in Zechariah chapter 3 and verse 8, as well as elsewhere. It is a title of the one who will come from the lineage of King David. It's what it means, this branch. It will branch out, even though it seems like the lineage of David is gone, it seems like all hope is removed, there will come a branch. A shoot is the actual language there. A shoot will come, a branch will come. Now, he's already emphasized, behold the man, but now he says, whose name is the branch. And every Hebrew reader would have read that and go, wait a minute, that's the Messiah. You just said, behold the man, and then in the very next breath you said, the branch, that's the Messiah. And in their mind, like, wait a minute, the Messiah is God. The Messiah is the Son of God. When you read Isaiah chapter number 9, and he's talking about the branch, he's talking about the Messiah to come, listen to the language. When he goes to describe the branch, this is how he describes him. And his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forevermore. Does that sound like a man to you? It sounds like God becoming part of this world, but both are simultaneously true. He is priest and he is king. He is man and he is God. He is both. He transcends both of those. And so you have the man who is the branch, the man who is the Messiah, the man who is the Son of God. Now look at the end of verse number 12. He says, well, you know, what will this man of God do? Or what will this God-man do? Well, it says at the end of verse number 12, he will come from his place, he shall branch out. Where is his place? His place is on his throne in heaven. He will come from heaven. He will come from his place. He will come from his throne in heaven, and he shall branch out, which will be on earth. This is why Jesus, when he came, the message of Jesus was the kingdom of heaven is coming. Go prepare people. Go let them know. God's kingdom, God's rule is supreme in heaven, but that is not true down here on earth right now. This world is still occupied and ruled by the prince of the power of the air that currently occupies this world, and that is Satan. And he will remove him. And Jesus himself, the Messiah, he will leave his place, his throne in heaven, and he will branch that throne out. He will branch that kingdom out onto this earth. And he will be the supreme ruler of heaven and earth as King of kings and Lord of lords. By the way, we're in the Old Testament, in case you forgot. It doesn't feel much like it, does it? We're in the Old Testament, focusing entirely on Jesus, the Messiah. Now, what will he do? When he leaves his place, when he comes from heaven to earth to establish his kingdom, what will he do? Well, look at the end of verse number 12. Again, there are 4 things that Jesus will do when he comes. The first is this: he will build a temple for himself. It won't be a temple to worship God in. Of course, that's also true, but he is God, so it'll be a temple for him. He says at the end of verse number 12, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. Yes, he shall build the temple of the Lord. Now don't forget that at the moment that this is being written, that Governor Zerubbabel is in the middle of a building project. He's got 4 more years left before the temple is complete. And then many years later on, during the time of the Roman occupation, that you'll have the temple of Herod that will be established at that time. And so there are temples, in fact, there's talks of another temple being built in Jerusalem, perhaps even in our lifetime. But we're not talking about that, are we? We're talking about a temple that Jesus himself will build. Not some temple that men's hands have been involved in and men's creativity have been part of. We're talking about his temple. He will build. And he repeated it twice there. That's why he ends verse number 12 was saying, he shall build the temple of the Lord. And in case, it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, he says it again in verse number 13. Yes, he shall build the temple of the Lord. This is his temple. He's the one who will build it. So he'll build a temple when he comes. Also, Jesus will be worshiped in his temple when he comes. Look at verse 13. In the middle of it, he says, he shall bear the glory. Or in other words, he will be the splendor of the temple. Yes, the temple will be grand. Yes, the temple will be spectacular. Yes, the temple, just as the disciples oohed and awed at Herod's temple, it's going to be infinitely more when it comes to Jesus' temple. But the temple itself is not the splendor. The one who occupies it will be. The Messiah who sits on his throne inside of the temple. And there won't be anything in the temple symbolically representing Jesus. It will be Jesus himself in the temple. There won't be some place for sacrifice in the temple. It will be he himself in the temple. He will be the splendor of the temple. He will be the king. He will be the high priest over the earth. And he will sit and rule from that temple, which is the very next thing here. He will build a temple. He will be worshiped in that temple. But look at verse 13 at the very end of it. He will rule the earth from his temple. It says, and he shall sit and rule on his throne. The temple will have a throne in it, not an altar. It'll have a throne where the altar once was. In the temple, there will be his throne, and he will sit on his throne. And from his throne, he will rule this globe. He will rule this earth. But he won't just rule this earth. The last thing here, verse number 13, is that he will bring righteousness to the earth from his temple. It says, and he shall be a priest on his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. He will be notice in verse 13 there, once again, he shall sit and rule on his throne. That's his kingship. And he shall be a priest on his throne. That's his priestly work. The Messiah will be king and priest, ruling from a specific location there on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where he will rule over all of the earth. And he ends verse 13 by saying, and the counsel, or in other words, the rule of his peace shall be between them both. Both of them being his kingship and his high priestly work. That there will be perfection. It'll be a perfect rule. It will be perfect peace. There will be perfect righteousness. There will be perfect order in the world. Throughout all of the history of the nation of Israel, they had some good kings, but a whole lot of bad kings. And they had some good priests, but a whole lot of bad priests. And all of that will be a thing of the past. It will be one king, and he will be perfect. He will be righteous. He will be good forevermore. There will be one high priest to rule righteousness into all of humanity, and it will be perfect, and it will be forevermore. And when he says that, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both, that's very similar to what we just read a moment ago in Isaiah 9, when he said, of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. That's what this is referencing. when all things are made right, when everything in this world becomes as God intended and planned providentially for it to be, when he rules this earth. Now let's close this up. And I haven't even looked at my clock today. Verse 14, we'll end this chapter. So here you have this coronation of Joshua the high priest. And they know that this is not representing them. They know that this is symbolically pointing to the future Messiah to come. They know that. And so what Zechariah tells them, beginning in verse number 14, is that you need to make a memorial for this moment. Create a memorial that will be housed in the temple so that you can remind yourself of this important truth. So that you can remember in the days ahead that this is what it's all about. This is the most important thing. So he says in verse 14, now the elaborate crown shall be for a memorial in the temple of the Lord, for Helem, Tobijah, Jedaiah, and Hin, the son of Zephaniah. Now he mentions those names again, but notice he kind of, he uses a nickname for some of them. So Heldiah, as we looked at a moment ago, that means the Lord's world, or the world belongs to the Lord. But he uses the nickname Helem, which means also strength. It is God's strength that will accomplish this goal. It is God's strength that will bring about these prophecies. And Tobijah, it means the goodness of Yahweh, or the goodness of God, or Yahweh is good. And Jedaiah means God knows, or Yahweh knows best. And then he throws in Hin. And Hin is not referring to a chicken. It's a Hebrew word. It means grace. Because none of this is even able to be accomplished apart from God's grace. The world does not deserve this. You do not deserve this. The Jews certainly do not deserve this. But it is God's grace that will make it all happen. And he gives one final prophecy, verse number 15. One final prophecy to Zechariah. He says, even those from afar shall come and build the temple of the Lord. Just in a spiritual sense, for 2,000 years now, God's spiritual Israel has been being built. God's spiritual temple is being built. We are the spiritual temple of God. And he didn't do it all by himself. He has included us in that building process. We get to preach the gospel. We get to go and proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. And we are participating around the globe in building that spiritual temple of Jesus Christ. But when that physical temple comes in the future, he says, even those from afar shall come and build the temple of the Lord. Now the phrase, those from afar, multiple times in the book of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, is a reference to the diaspora, those Jews who are, because of persecution, who are spread to the ends of the earth. He says, I will bring them back from afar, and I will establish them in this land, and they will assist him. They will help the Messiah. They will help King Jesus. But it's also a reference to all Gentile believers. That's a phrase that is equally used in the Old Testament and New Testament alike. Those who are far, that's the Gentiles, those who believe in Jesus, follow Jesus, who were afar but are now near. He says, I will bring them together. There will be unity. And those that were far away will now come in, and we will work together. We will live together. We will be together. And this temple, I will rule over the earth. Then you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. The me is the Messiah. Then you will know that then you will know that God truly has sent the Messiah to you. And this shall come to pass if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God. This will happen, by the way. It will happen because of the promise of the new covenant. The new covenant is so important because the new covenant is what ensures it will be fulfilled. The new covenant is the guarantee that it will come about. That's why I took a whole Sunday to focus on the new covenant. Because none of this happens without the guarantee of the fulfillment, the unconditional fulfillment, the unconditional promise of God through the new covenant. So what should that mean for us as Christians? Well, 2 Peter 3, verse number 14, Peter says this, "Therefore, beloved, looking forward to these things." Now in the chapter, he's talking about the day of the Lord and the establishment of the kingdom and all of the things that we've been reading about. So he says, looking forward to these things, be diligent to be found in him in peace, without spot, blameless. We know that that future that we just read in chapter number 6 is going to happen. Nothing can alter it. Nothing will stop it. And there is no atheist and there is no government and there is no religion in this world that will stop these promises, these prophecies from being fulfilled. Jesus will come to this earth. He will build his temple. He will rule on this earth. He will bring righteousness. He will be king, and we will live in that kingdom together. That is going to happen. Therefore, we should look around at the life that we live right now and start thinking a little bit more clearly about what our priority should be. Because it's not all about bigger houses and bass boats and better retirements, although those things are wonderful and nice to have. They are not the end. They are not the goal. They are not the purpose. Everything is ultimately leading to that kingdom where we will live with him. Let's get busy living our lives as if it really truly is a reality, and making sure that our lives and the priorities and the choices that we make align with that reality. Otherwise, why are you even coming to church? Why do you call yourself a Christian? Why do you say you believe in Jesus? Why have you given your life to him if you're not going to take this stuff serious? If you're not going to try to rescue as many people as you can from the judgment to come? If you're not going to be busy preaching the gospel, if you're not going to be busy like Noah crying for people to get in the boat, if you're not going to be, as Jesus said, to go out into the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in, if you're not going to be proactive in trying to rescue as many people as you can before that day comes, why are you even involved in this? The whole point is for us as Christians to get serious, because we cannot boast of tomorrow. We do not know what a day may bring. We do not know when this is going to happen, but we know the time is drawing near. Let's get serious about it.